everyone. Thank you so much for joining another one of our incredible CBC webinars. Today's topic is on the regulatory and legal implications of NFTs, or as they're called, non-fungible tokens. So I always like to start off with giving just a little bit of background on the CBC. If you're new to our webinars, you'll get to learn about us. If you're returning, thank you so much for continuing to follow our content. So we started our group back in about 2017, and we basically started here in Alberta to help our technology community. We do a lot of education, advocacy, event creation, specifically for blockchain applications and for their companies. If you'd like to learn more about who we are and what we do, please join us at canadablockchain.ca. We host classes every single month. So if you're interested in learning more about it, they're free classes. We have webinars just about every single week from our incredible committees. So we really like to push education. We love getting involved in projects and white papers. And of course, we're always advocating for all the amazing companies in the space that are doing great things to help push blockchain technology across the country. Of course, as a not-for-profit, we couldn't get anywhere without the support of our incredible members. Many of them have been with us since day one. So a great big thank you to all the amazing members that we have up here on the screen. And a special thank you today to McLeod Law for being our gold member as well as our sponsor. They opened their doors back in 1980 as a two-person operation, and now they are an incredible firm with 55 lawyers in 40 different areas. So if you are looking to speak with some really solid lawyers on the Bitcoin security side of things, talk to Matt Burgoyne, who is also going to be your moderator for this today. So thank you, McLeod Law. We love it when you guys engage with us, so please do. There will be a Q&A period for this. I would really encourage, please put your questions into the Q&A section. You'll see just a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please put them there. It's hard to follow in the chat, but of course you can communicate in the chat all you want. But if you have questions that you would like our panelists to answer after their discussion, please put them there. Love it if you engage with us. Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. If you like anything our panelists have to say, you can shout it out. If you put it onto Twitter or LinkedIn, we use the hashtag #CanadaBlockchain, and we will like, follow, and share it. Also really exciting, it started this year. We are now in July going to have our 7th issue of our magazine. Again, this is free content. We love putting out as much amazing free educational content as we can. This one comes from our insights from attending Bitcoin 2021 in Miami, which was really fascinating. So all the cool little tips and tidbits and amazing interviews that we had. So please check that one out. It'll go live on July 1st. And we have all of our past issues on the website as well. So today's amazing topic, of course, these are your amazing panelists and speakers. So you have Matt Burgoyne, and just a little bit of background on Matt. He is a corporate commercial lawyer and the head of the cryptocurrency and blockchain group at McLeod Law. Since 2013, Matt has advised clients in the digital currency law and has assisted in the formation of cryptocurrency exchanges, assisted digital token and coin developers, cryptocurrency ATM providers, cryptocurrency investors, cryptocurrency miners, and cryptocurrency related investment funds. He's done a lot in this space, eh? And Matt provides legal advice to businesses involved in stable coins and initial coin offerings, along with securities law and anti-money laundering law. And speaking with him, you'll have Barry Sookman. He's a senior counsel at McCarthy Tétrault. I'm sorry, I probably pronounced that wrong. I butchered it. I'm slightly dyslexic, so forgive me. We have Denise Weeres. She's director of the new economy for Alberta Securities Commission. And we have Maggie. She's the CEO of GoNFT. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Matt to do a more formal introduction of all his panelists.
Thanks so much, Clea, for the introduction. I appreciate that. And boy, this is a great panel we have lined up, and some panelists from different backgrounds. We're all lawyers. We're all legally trained, but as you'll see, different backgrounds and experiences. But this topic of NFT, it's still a hot topic, I think. There was a boom, several months ago, and then I've read that the activity died down. But I think this is an area of cryptocurrency that's here to stay, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what NFTs are, what they're not. what you can do with them, what you can't do with them, and some of the legal issues aren't obvious initially, and they're nuanced. And so I'm hoping with this panel that we can kind of tease out some more, some deep information on NFTs. And so what I'll do, I think, is just give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, just a few minutes each, folks, and then we can get started with the formal question and answer portion of the webinar. So Denise, do you want to go first?
Okay. My name is Denise Weeres. As Clea mentioned, I'm the Director of New Economy at the Alberta Securities Commission. And I head up our sandbox team, our regulatory sandbox team, that looks at sort of new market participants that want to use technology in a new way that intersects with securities laws. So quite often that means platforms perhaps that need to be registered as a dealer or that are a marketplace. Much of what we've been focusing on is the sort of the crypto asset space. So that's kind of my relevance here.
Thanks, Denise. And I think I'll speak for myself. So so I'm at McLeod Law, as Clea said, but I'm here kind of providing my personal opinions, and so I'm not necessarily speaking for the firm. And please don't construe anything we're saying as formal legal advice. If you have any questions about NFT, if you want to launch a business, if you're an artist, if you want to buy an NFT and you have legal questions, please speak to your own lawyer. So we're all kind of just here, on our own, just speaking from our own personal viewpoints. So, and I think that includes Denise and the Alberta Securities Commission. So Barry, how about, why don't you go next?
Sure, and I'll be really brief. Thanks, Matt, and thank you very much for inviting me to this group and this webinar. So I'm a tech and an intellectual property lawyer, and I've probably been doing tech since there was, even a tech practice goes back that long. And I'm an author of an 8-volume book on computer, internet, and electronic commerce law. So everything digital, including cryptocurrencies and NFTs, are of real interest. It's sort of a cutting edge practice. And I do both the commercial practical stuff, but also I'm sort of this closet academic with having written books on it. I'm an adjunct professor at Osgoode Hall Law School. I'm on the advisory board of Osgoode's IP program, and on the advisory board of McDonald-Laurier Institute think tank. So I kind of look at this in multiple ways.
Thank you. That's I think Barry is regarded as one of the foremost IP lawyers in Canada. So I think he's being humble. It's an honor to have him here, and no, I'm really looking forward to this. And Maggie, as someone who's in the space, please introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, it is an honor to be on this panel. So yeah, I am a lawyer turned blockchain founder, practiced as a lawyer since 2014, and then joined the crypto space since 2017. And my passion is really, how do we make this technology accessible to everyone? And I think there's a lot of myths around, do you have to be an expert in blockchain to own an NFT, what this is? And right now, my project, GoNFT, we are partnering up with some of the high-end fashion luxury brands, as well as some of the top players in the art and the music industry. And what we want to do is, how do we basically package a lot of the digital content and the digital goods in a way that it has value, and these brands can now interact with their community, with their fans in a new way, by allowing the fans to basically own a piece of their digital content. So I'm very, very passionate in the space, and would love to, dive into our conversations. Oh,
great. Thank you so much, Maggie. It's great to have you on the panel here. I'm really glad excited that you joined us. So why don't we get into the questions? So Maggie, can you explain to us what are NFTs and what are they used for?
I always forget to mute myself.
No worries.
Okay, so yes, so NFTs, it's actually a bit of a loaded question because it's like asking, what is internet? So NFT at the basic level is this technology is just a tool. So much like how the internet allowed information to free, from one user on the other end of the world to this user, NFT is a technology that essentially gives value to digital content and digital and also experiences. And it does this by allowing something called digital scarcity. What it means is if you have an image, a song, a video, or even a ticket to, let's say, a sporting event, all of these things right now, if they are digital, someone can easily copy it. However, you can actually put these digital content on the blockchain. And in doing so, you're creating a limited supply of this digital content. And because of the limited supply, it now has a value. So I would say essentially NFT is turning these digital content into digital collectibles. And that now spins a lot of new use case for these digital content. Yeah, and I think as everyone probably know, for as long as humans have existed, everyone loves to collect. In the early days, it might be movies or all-star player baseball cards. And now there's this big movement around collecting digitally, especially with COVID and with everything going online. Concerts are happening online, art galleries are now happening online. And so there's this big movement about how do we collect digitally while we can still protect our interest. If you've paid $100 for a digital piece, you want to make sure that you have some sort of authentication for your ownership of this digital content. And this is where NFT technology comes in.
Cool. That's interesting, actually, your comment of we've, especially in the last year and a half, we've kind of been forced to shift to a more digital world. And maybe it's not a coincidence that NFTs have boomed in the last, year and a half while we've all been, sitting at home because of COVID. So that's that's an interesting point. We're moving everything digitally. So Barry, do you have anything to add to that explanation of what an NFT is and maybe like what it can be used for?
Yeah. So just in terms of what it was, of what it is, technically it's a unit of data. It's a unique crypto token, and it's stored and managed on the blockchain. I think everyone who's listening probably knows that, and everyone knows what the blockchain is. What I want to comment on is actually the misnomer about whether these are actually non-fungible tokens, right? And they're often distinguished from Bitcoin on the basis that every Bitcoin is the same and therefore they're all fungible. And in some senses, that's true when you look at some of the uses of NFTs where there is a single piece of content that's either stored in the token or it's linked in the token, but there's just one of it. But in fact, many of the uses aren't for single, one-off, one-of-a-kind collectibles. What you often see are limited editions, and there can be, when you talk about scarcity, it's not necessarily a scarcity of one, it could be a scarcity of 20, 50, or 30,000, as you see. And in that respect, while each token might be different from others that have different content, in many respects, they're fungible, where you've got the same work, whether it's a piece of art or whether it's some other content, and it's part of that series. So in some senses they're non-fungible, some aren't. That this has implications for a variety of different commercial aspects to it, and I'm sure as we're going to hear, it's got some important considerations when you think about security law.
For sure, yeah, no, that's great. So there's so it's possible for NFTs to be fungible then, potentially. Maggie, I get this question sometimes, like, is there just one type of NFT, or like, are there different types of NFT? Or I guess there's different token standards, right? And where do you typically buy these pieces of information, packets of information?
Okay, so yeah, so there are different types of NFTs. The most common, as probably a lot of people have heard of, is on Ethereum. So it's a very well developed ecosystem already on Ethereum. But now there's also other blockchains that are supporting the NFT standard. So for example, Algorand, Avalanche, Binance is another big one that's coming into the picture. I think basically for the mainstream audience, the big difference is depending on a different blockchain, the transaction fee is different. So, back in March and April, when everyone and their mother is talking about NFT, the transaction fee can go up to $100. So you can buy a piece for 100, but you're paying $100 just in transaction fee. And, we've realized with our community that that is just not very sustainable. So the other blockchains that are now coming into play, for example, the Binance chain, actually it's less than 50 cents for the transaction. It doesn't matter how many transactions there are. So there are a lot of benefits. And then also just further to Barry's comment, some NFTs can be fungible. It's actually funny because NFT stands for non-fungible token. And now there's this new term called fungible, non-fungible token, which kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. But basically what it allows people to do is after they own this piece, they can now actually stake it, which is they can earn some sort of interest or some sort of rewards by owning this digital content. And that again depends on the different standard of the NFT also. So yes, there are quite a few types. But I would say for the mainstream audience, if you want to just get your hands onto one, the biggest marketplace right now is called OpenSea. Open, like, and sea is the ocean sea. And they have all sorts of NFTs on there. My experience with going in there is like shopping on winners. You really have to understand what you want to get. Otherwise, it can just get a little bit overwhelming. So that's a great place to start. There's also another platform called Nifty Gateway, NIFTY, and that is more of a auction platform. So a lot of the big artists and musicians, for example, Deadmau5 or The Weeknd would issue their NFTs, or Paris Hilton would issue their NFTs on that platform. But I would say the price is pretty high for the average person. It's a few $1,000s Canadian to sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for one piece. So it's not exactly accessible by the average person. And actually, that's why, I'm very excited about my platform. That's what we want to do. We want to make it accessible and really opening up to the mainstream audience.
Thanks for that, Maggie. That's a great explanation. Denise, I'm gonna get to you. I have a few questions for you regarding securities law implications, but do you want to comment on like the nature of NFTs or anything do you want to add to anything that Barry and Maggie have said, or?
Not really. I think the comments they made are, some of the same issues that we're looking at. There's, names, and we saw this, in the 2017 when people are talking about ICOs and utility tokens, and, they sort of stick a label on something and think that the legal implications follow from that. So there's all sorts of things that, are being referenced as NFTs, and then they're not fun. They are fungible. And so they're, the terms being used in a lot of different ways. So I think we just have to make sure we look at the substance of what actually we're talking about in each of the situations.
Substance over form. Yes, that is definitely relevant in this space. And I've heard that too. I just want to ask Barry another kind of more technical question. Barry, do NFTs verify the authenticity of physical or digital assets?
So Matt, that's a really good question. NFTs in theory are claimed to have value because the blockchain establishes ownership and authenticity. It's purported to have what they call in the art industry provenance. And you see, like throughout the literature and on sites, claims that NFTs provide and it's either authenticity, originality, ownership, uniqueness, and you heard Maggie talk about scarcity, right? But here we're really talking about the digital work, right? Not just the token, it's the work that's in the Bitcoin or the work that's linked to it. You know, for example, if you went to Super Rare that sells crypto art, they talk about artwork is authentically created by the artists. And they talk about it as Instagram meets Christie's, this, you know, patina of legitimacy and reputation. And they talk about its being scarce. Or if you look at MLB champions that were selling token bobbleheads of players, right? You'll see them making various claims about guaranteeing this token, guaranteeing true digital ownership, and each one being unique. I think in many respects, and Denise probably has analyzed this as well, these claims often confuse the token with the underlying content, like the artwork or the fashion or whatever it is. NFTs can authenticate ownership of the token. The blockchain can record the history of transactions and dealings with the token and how it's linked to the asset. But in terms of the underlying asset itself, the NFT doesn't establish the asset even exists, that rights are capable of existing in the underlying work, or who owns the copy or who owns the intellectual property rights. They don't even prevent multiple NFTs for the same work being created or stop, you know, NFT copies from being made available. So the claims that NFTs provide authenticity, originality, ownership, uniqueness of the digital work, really, I don't think are true or are really overblown. Buyers, just like when they're buying a collectible in the analog world, need to trust the source. You know, are they buying a token from someone with Christie's reputation, or they really got to do their diligence?
So, so are people buying then a work like you know, a work of art that, I guess there's no guarantee that it's an original work of art if it's claimed to be original, but I guess people have a right to the token, so they can say they own the token, but not necessarily the art that accompanies the token. Is that right?
Yeah, well, generally, the best case would be that they might own the copy to what's actually in the token, or maybe they have some of the access right to what's linked to from the token, or they may have some kind of license to it. But people are spending a lot of money on some of these things, even though you might say the rights are somewhat, to use a very, very technical legal term, sketchy. You know, you've got $2.9 million for a Jack Dorsey tweet, or $69 million, right, for a Beeple's digital artwork. So people are paying a ton of money. And, you know, in some cases, you don't have what you have in traditional marketplaces, where you've got a set of terms and conditions where sellers are, you know, representing and warranting all the things that are really supposed to be attributes of what you get when you buy a token. And buyers aren't necessarily sophisticated enough. And, you know, for low volume or low cost items, it's really maybe not such a big concern. But if you're starting to get into the bigger dollars, then these issues really are a concern, or should be.
And I suppose, just, I'm going to get to you, Denise, next, but I suppose that, you know, these traditional, like in an auction, the traditional terms that you would see in a physical auction, I guess the terms and the rules could be put into, like, incorporated into terms of service of the website that's hosting the auction. I suppose that's possible. But yeah. So Denise, then what are your thoughts on the securities law implications of NFTs? And I mean, the question I had written down was like, what are the securities regulators thinking? But of course, like, your personal thoughts based on yeah, on the research you've done. What are some of the securities issues?
Okay. Yeah, I can't provide legal advice, and I don't think any lawyer would, but I'll try and give you some general things that I think about. One is that securities law in Canada is principle-based. And so sort of what I was saying before, nothing turns on the name or the label that we're giving it. We do have to look at the substance. Another is that blockchain technology doesn't change that. And I think this sort of goes to Barry's comment is, sometimes what's disturbing is that people, because there's this technology aspect, they think that they're in either a legal vacuum or just consumers or investors are forgetting about just normal things they would ask to, like, they'd want to understand what rights they're getting and things like that. So blockchain technology doesn't change our assessment of whether or not there's a security. It's not a security just because you're using blockchain. It's not escaping securities law just because you're using blockchain. I think when you look at whether securities law applies, it's important to look at, Canadian securities law. So we have people quite commonly now, everybody's talking about the Howey test, which is a US test for assessing whether or not you have an investment contract. And it's great that there's this general knowledge now of the Howey test, but we're in Canada, and we need to look at sort of what's our test here. We have in the definition of security in Canada, there's 16, in Alberta anyways, there's 16 different prongs or branches to it. Investment contract is just one of those. In Canada, we also have jurisdiction over derivatives. So we have to look at all of that. Some of the branches that can be relevant in, the crypto context, or things like evidence of indebtedness, evidence of title to assets or property. So those are prongs that might not be relevant in the, US assessment, but that are here. But just going to that investment contract concept, which is one people often use. So, our leading case is Pacific Coast Coin Exchange from the Supreme Court of Canada. And they did favorably reference the Howey test, the US test. So that's definitely relevant to us in Canada. So do we have an investment of money with an expectation of profit, in a common enterprise, and the profits to come significantly from the effort of others? But they also referred favorably to the risk capital test, which is a different test from a case called Hawaii in the US. And it really looked at, like, is the investor's money at risk? And that they're dependent on, the effort of the promoters. So that's also, a factor for us in looking at these. And then as well, they really reinforce the purposive interpretation of the law in Canada. And, so what that means is, do the protections of securities law make sense in the circumstances? And, so that's sort of the lens that we bring to looking at that. So I think, are all NFTs securities? I think it's unlikely that, securities regulators are going to assert jurisdiction over all NFTs, but are some things that call themselves NFTs. Some of those things, like Barry was mentioning, fractionalized interests in, the underlying might be a non-fungible piece of art, but a fractionalized interest in it. An intermediated situation where somebody's offering some additional, custody and marketing and things like that. Those start to be situations that, you look at factors that cause it to tend more towards a security or less towards a security. Those types of factors, would start to make it tend more towards being a security.
If I can add sort of one comment, when you look at whether there's a securities issue or not, you also run into the broader question of what jurisdictions you have to consider. And it used to be people carried on business in one place, and then whoops, in 2000, right, we had the internet, and then people started realizing that when they started conducting business over the internet, suddenly they'd be subject to the laws of many countries, or the personal jurisdiction of many countries, And sophisticated players have recognized this in a variety of fields, particularly, the IP owners that are commercializing recognize this, and the big marketplaces recognize this, the big social networks recognize this. But in a kind of more newer marketplace where you don't have the same kind of necessarily sophisticated actors, and I'm not saying I'm not saying that they all are not. I'm just saying they're new entrants that don't have the sophistication to be able to do the analysis, not only that Denise was making, but to figure out how the laws can be nuanced and different around the world. And that makes it much more complex, where you've got marketplaces that it's open to anybody from anywhere, and you can distribute the tokens or resell them, anywhere. So kind of the point I'm making, obviously, is that you've got to look at all the applicable laws that could apply, both securities and others, in all the jurisdictions where you're making content available via NFTs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Barry and Denise. And I was thinking, like, in my own practice, I see, I definitely have come across examples of NFT projects that I think are in danger of violating provincial consumer protection legislation. We have an internet service regulation as part of our Consumer Protection Act in Alberta. I've seen projects where there's almost a promotion of liquidity for the NFT, and that there's like a secondary market, and that you will be able to resell in the secondary market, and there's kind of almost an implication that there could be an upside to that sale, and that's where I get a little bit nervous if there's a big centralized marketplace where there's the promise of resell. Then it kind of looks more like what Denise was saying, the ICO boom in 2017, 2018. And Barry, that's right, like there's so many privacy law, and right, like if an artist is in one country and a buyer is in another, and the promoters are in Canada, it can become quite complex. Maggie, I wanted to ask you, like, how big is the NFT space in your opinion? Like, is this something that is just going to keep coming and going to keep cascading, and it's not just a flash in the pan, is it?
Mm-mm. So I believe that we are just in the infancy of the NFT space. And I'm going to go back to the analogy of the internet again. I feel like we're in probably 1998 or 1999 right now, where, the big boom early in March and April is kind of the first show of what this technology is, what it can do. But it really hasn't permeated or even getting started in many of the industries. Right now, primarily when you think about NFT, it is in the art industry, digital painting, something along that line. But in the fashion, in the music, in the events, a lot of these items can be tokenized. And I know that, from a security perspective, there might be a very, very blurred line. But from a practical perspective, from a consumer perspective, it's actually a lot easier. So for example, if I'm going to a sports event or a concert, it's actually a lot easier for me to have all my tickets as an NFT in one place, rather than going on different websites and getting my tickets that way. So I think there's definitely a lot of benefits for the consumer. And yes, we're just getting started. And I actually have a question for the panel. Like the previous question, in terms of the different security considerations for the space, has there been any case in the Canadian legal system in terms of any big marketplaces or any players where the our equivalent of SEC is looking at all these different considerations?
Well, Denise, you could probably, I think this in one of the CSA notices that came out a few years ago, did they not specifically mention non-fungible tokens?
I don't recall us mentioning non-fungible tokens. So are you thinking about, like, back when we issued a couple notices, 46307 and 46308, and that was really around the time of the ICO boom. And so it really just provided guidance generally on trying to assess whether or not something was an investment contract. So we had, looked at, and some of the factors were where one of the factors listed there was whether or not it was fungible. And I think we were looking at like things like CryptoKitties at the time, or is it non-fungible? So there was that, but I don't think there's any, there's any case that I'm aware of that deals with NFTs. And we don't really have a lot of case law in this area generally, even with like the crypto assets. So most of the cases are pretty clear cut, the ones that are pretty obvious. So no, I'm not aware of anything. I don't know, Matt, if you know something from another jurisdiction or.
No, I'm not aware of anything. It's interesting. I'm not. I know in terms of anti-money laundering legislation, I'm pretty sure there's going to be more of a focus from maybe FATF and maybe even the regulators in Canada, on NFTs, because of course art can be used to launder money. But no, I don't think there's a case or a decision to point to. I mean, for guidance on, if you're talking about securities law, I would look at the CSA notices that Denise referred to that came out around 2017, 2018. And there was one that specifically was in regards to, when is a token a security? Like it really dove into, I think that's relevant when you're analyzing NFTs. Barry, one question, I think this is a really good question. So if I'm a creator of a piece of art, digital art, and I want to mint my art on the blockchain, do I need to worry about IP issues? If I'm a promoter of an NFT platform, do I need to worry about IP issues? And maybe if you can even talk about what we mean when we say IP generally.
Sure, that's a good question. And just to go back to the point you're making before about anti-money laundering and securities, we found that we've had lots of questions on that. Anna Badura at McCarthy's, who I know you know, and I were on a call the other day, and it was someone that was thinking about establishing a marketplace. And because many of these NFTs, right, are purchased with Ether or other cryptocurrencies, right, there were real issues related to anti-money laundering. And so that's one of the, let's use the word drags or cautions, right, that anyone who's interested in this really has to look at. These entities are not FIs, and they don't have the standard AML kind of practices, right, that FIs would have. To deal with your question, there certainly are intellectual property issues associated with NFTs. Intellectual property is an area of law that has different facets. The one that probably is most implicated with NFTs are copyrights, which are a set of rights that an owner of a work, whether it's an artwork or it's a game character for a video game or a bobblehead, there's copyright in all of that. Intellectual property includes rights in trademarks and logos, which get used quite pervasively as well in NFTs. And then there are other rights like personality rights. If someone wants to mint something and they want to use the image or likeness of a famous rock star or movie star or professional sports person, and they decide to create or mint a work that uses that person's image, you could implicate those kinds of rights. But the one that you see talked about the most is really copyright. And if a person makes a copy of a work, copy of an artwork, or displays something publicly, right, then that can implicate copyright rights. And so when you kind of look at what happens here, many of the activities that sellers or buyers would engage in implicate copyright. In the old collectibles, you didn't have the same issue, but today with everything being digital and everything being somehow potentially displayed or exhibited on the internet, you have bigger problems. So one of the problems you see are people who are minting NFTs, right? To mint an NFT, you actually have to own not just a copy of the work, but you have to have the right to use it, either a license to mint it and exploit it, right? And you see these kinds of agreements, or you have to be the copyright owner. And if you're not, you can't assume that because you bought a piece of art, you can take a picture and mint it, because if you do, you could end up infringing. And there is a famous case of an artist's work that got put up on OpenSea, and then the estate complained and it had to be taken down because somebody thought that they had the right to mint it simply because they had the copy, which of course isn't true. Because many NFTs are not outright sold, but they're subject to licenses, right? Licenses are ways for copyright owners to limit uses that can be made of intellectual property, which include NFTs. And so uses outside of the scope of the licenses, and there are usually quite a lot of them in what you see in the marketplace, like not making any kind of commercial use. Those things can get you into trouble, both in terms of breaching licenses and infringing copyright. Even reselling, sometimes, if there's not an express right, can create a problem. You know, there's no issue if you buy a baseball card or an autographed piece of art, you can sell it because you own it. But with digital, some of the laws around reselling and exhaustion are complicated. I won't get into them, but you know, they pose a problem that you don't see in the analog world. Also, you have many situations where, in fact, most cases, the actual intellectual property, the thing, is actually not in the token because of the size limitations. So it's hosted on some site. And what we've seen are notice and takedown requests to take them down. And if they get taken down, then that link is broken. And so you have a token that links to nothing, right? So there's all kinds of situations, and I could probably eat up all the time we have, but suffice it to say that because there are these problems, people need to really think it through. Sophisticated parties like, you know, music labels and movie studios, they know what they need to do. And there's a little bit of learning to get others up to speed on this. Also, you know, you were talking about consumer protection laws before, and there are implied conditions of title that can be implied with respect to certain kinds of sales. There's a really good Ontario Court of Appeal case on it. But there's a real question about whether they would apply to NFTs. Cryptocurrencies have been held in a number of different cases to be personal properties. They're definitely personal property, but they're intangible personal property. And so there's a question of whether they be considered a good to which some of these terms will apply. We've seen this in other kind of digital contexts. So again, if you look at whether the legal framework we have around the countries are adequate to protect consumers, right? There's some real issues about whether some of these laws are going to apply or not.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that explanation, Barry. It's really interesting. If you look at like super rare's terms of service, you're buying a right, a limited license to something. You're not actually buying, the title. And so like how is so I mean, I guess that's I don't know if that's clearly explained to people, and people might not realize all they have is a very limited right to use the image that they're buying or the good. Denise, do you have any comments on that, or?
Like nothing new is going to add from a securities law perspective, but just, yeah, like I think some just basic legal issues, right? Like with what do you actually own? What's the terms? One thing that I keep seeing pop up is people talking about how, NFTs are going to be used with, real property. And here in Alberta, we have the Torin system, the land title system. So it's not registered on title, like you, what have you done? You've got big risk. So I did just sort of, all of this has to be, basic sort of legal principles, and look at like the sort of the legal and regulatory structure for the thing that you think you're buying.
Good point, mate. Oh,
yeah, I'm gonna jump into it.
Sorry. Yeah.
A lot of this, like I said, we are still in infancy, and I think the ideal scenario is if some of the big players in the industry can work with the regulator and try to think about, what are the use case and what are really the benefits of this technology. For example, applying to the real estate, maybe they can work with the landowners registry, and we can have fractionalized ownership of some of the the big condo buildings or some of the heavier asset classes, and that just allows the mainstream audience to now own a share, but you can still do in a way that is regulated. So I think that would be the ideal scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think sometimes when we have this discussion, for example, is something a security, and like, a fractionalized interest in a commercial building could very well be a security. But it's like people stop at that and then they're like, okay, we're done. If it's a security, we can't continue. And you're like, well, no, it's a security. It just means you have to, do some things, right? Like we expect some disclosure, or so it's not like binary. It's a security, and the market has to shut down. So, yeah, like you said, come on in and have a conversation, and let's see if there's, how can we make this work and still, protect investors and allow the market to work.
I just want to reply that from a practical standpoint, because of how fast the space moves, as the, like a founder or a builder in the space, we really have to assess the opportunity cost with, for example, going down a security route versus just pushing out a product, go to market, get a lot of users, get that traction, and then maybe deal with security later, kind of like what Uber did in many parts of the world. So just from a practical point, that is, I think one of the reasons why someone, when they see, oh, this is a security, they would just kind of like stop and back off.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Barry.
Philosophy of a lot of the high tech, particularly out of California, move fast to break things.
Totally. And I don't know if I'd recommend that approach. I mean, no, I mean, definitely. But like Denise said, I mean, it shouldn't be a non-starter just because something's a security. I mean, we act for many issuers of securities, and there's different exemptions that can be used. The CSA Sandbox program has been very helpful for some of my clients, and frankly, and I'm not just saying this because Denise is here and I'm an advisor on one of her committees, but the regulators are very friendly when you approach them, and if you're being proactive. And you're giving them a heads up of what you're going to do, and you're responsive. I think that goes a long way. And just I don't know that we necessarily shut the door on a project if it turned out the NFT was going to be a security. It's just you just have to take a different route and recognize maybe there's some additional disclosure and limitations. Which is maybe for the best, because you certainly as a company you don't want to end up with 10,000 angry users who are angry because they were misled in terms of what they bought. And yeah, no, for sure. Barry, so you mentioned that you and Anna, one of your colleagues who I know, were on a call the other day. Are you finding that there's an increase in inquiries about NFTs at your firm?
So there are in in different areas, and some of them are, what is this? Like I really don't understand what this is. Like, what is it I'm offering, and what are the different models that I can offer? Like, what is it I can really sell, and what is it people are really getting? Like that basic concept. Like I've sold stuff in this business for years and years and years, but this is different. What does it mean? Why is there such a craze? Why are people paying so much money for what I don't understand to be, the real value? And then, you kind of explain the analogy to collectibles and how it's subjective and everybody knows it is. And it's a little bit like tulips, right? As long as everyone thinks they're valuable, they're valuable, but people are trying to kind of figure that out. they read something about smart contracts, but aren't really sure whether smart contracts can apply and whether they need separate set of terms, right? So it's that kind of advisory stuff. And we at McCarthy's kind of work on teams, and Anna is really a leader in the sort of crypto space and the fintech space, and so I'll get on calls with her. And the clients are also concerned, particularly the more sophisticated clients who kind of understand the overall regulatory regime, and they are very concerned about not tipping over on things like AML and securities. So there's a variety of that, and then some clients sort of look at you and say, and what law applies here, and again that makes the tic-tac-toe of this kind of commercialization a little bit more difficult. So we have seen an uptick on it. Like, I'm not saying this is taking over the practice that McCarthy's has in our business law group and taking over M&A, but we see this as an important area, as a new area of growth. We agree with Maggie, right, that there's really no limit to what you theoretically can do with an NFT subject to applicable laws, right, and managing them, because we're talking about the blockchain, which is, as everybody knows, got people's imagination and innovative spirit, and then you take a new offshoot of it, right, with platforms that are enabling this, like Ethereum, right, that are built for this kind of development, commercialization, and then you think about the fact that the token can really represent just about anything. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there. There's also new business models, right, not only for owners of content to kind of live with their one-time sales, but you see artists getting trailing revenues on every resale. And artists have been pushing for something called droit de suite around the world for the longest time, and weren't able to get it in Canada. So it's really great to see technologies empowering innovation and potential. And when you see that, you have to think, right, that this is going to continue and it's going to evolve. And I think over time, like anything else, there will be standard sophistication, right? Right now, I think it's still in its infancy. And in a way, there's a chance for, lawyers and people on the call to try to work out frameworks, right, that will really make it work and take off. Because at the end of the day, what you need is not only a legal framework, but a way of using the legal frameworks to promote innovation. And I think with a little bit of legal thinking and maybe a little bit of harmonization across the sector, right, there are some real potentials here. And if that happens, I think there'll be more and more clients ringing on everybody's door for advice.
For sure. I've seen an uptick, but like, I agree, it's not taking over the practice, but I definitely in the last few months have seen more of an interest in, I'm grateful to be able to work on a file, because you kind of are able then to do a deep dive and kind of learn about it yourself. Maggie, so I just I want to ask you a question, and then we might switch over to Q&A, because I think we've only got an hour. Maggie, what do you see as the future of this industry? What's your vision for the next few years, and like where do you see the space going?
All right. So thank you for asking that question. It's so exciting to talk about future visions. So what drew me to this industry is I see this as a new business model for a lot of the individual creators. I'm talking about artists, musicians. There's always this concept of the starving artist. And after talking to a lot of the different artists in our community, we realized that it is because the current business model is done in a way that doesn't give them a lot of the control over their work. And, for example, art galleries could be taking up to 50% of a sale of a artwork. And what this technology allows them to do is it empowers these individual creators. It's saying that you, the artist, can decide what price you want to sell at, and also how much you can get on every future sale of your work. So you're not just getting money this one time. Every single future sale, you can actually get a portion of it. And you as the creator can decide, is it 10%, 20% that you're getting on all the future revenues of your work. I just think that is such a powerful way to, change the business model for these creators. And that in turn will encourage more people to want to create and want to, you can be working a normal 9-to-5 job, and then in your free time, you could be doing a lot more creative work. So that's reason one. And then reason two, my vision two for this tech is I also see this as a way to engage the community for a lot of the big brands, as well as just your normal mom and pop shops. And this community engagement really hinges on the fact that now the community can own a piece of your whatever you're selling. It can be your marketing campaign, it can be, this exclusive item that you're launching as part of your your fall fashion week brand. And when the community has an ownership over this piece, they now become your advocate, and they now want to go out and tell all their friends and everyone on social media about you, because when the value goes up, they also benefit. So I think this is a really interesting model. Like, businesses are shifting from, the advertising marketing to more of a social media influencer marketing, to this new model of how do we now engage our community through these tokens that we're issuing, and how do we turn our followers and our buyers into advocates for the brand. So those are the two visions I'm seeing.
Fascinating. It's a revolutionary change in terms of how artists are paid. And if there is such a token standard out there that can pay a royalty on that basis on an ongoing basis, I mean, it really could be a game changer, like you said, for a lot of starving artists. So that's great. Now, Kalea, I think we're running kind of out of time here, so maybe we should switch to Q&A. Or am I completely off? Do we have more time than that?
No, we have about 4 minutes left. So
okay, sorry.
That's good. Good discussion. All right. So we have a question here. This is more for Maggie, but can you describe some of the variances from the original NFT projects versus the 2.0 projects that seem to be more focused on features obtained from the programmable features, CryptoPunks versus VFriends?
That's a great question. So NFTs originated in, I would say, late 2016, 2017. And the first NFTs are CryptoKitties. A lot of people know them as just cute little kitties, and they were selling upwards of millions of dollars. So that was kind of the generation one NFT. Now, fast forward to this year, 2021 is when we really saw this generation two of NFT. And a lot of the generation two does have these capabilities built into the smart contracts. So for this question, yes, these are the programmable features. Some of these features include when you put a NFT on the blockchain, you can actually embed a personal message into the NFT, which is really cool. So again, if I'm the brand, and some of the brands we're working with is asking us this, how do we create a exclusive club for our clients? And one way to do this is you can issue a series of NFT and you can embed a secret link into the NFT. And for the buyer of that NFT, they now have access to this link and they can join this exclusive club, which is, another type of the community engagement I was talking about before. There's also other features associated with these generation two. And some of this includes the augmented reality. So, if I'm a fashion brand, not only can I have my digital outlook of the backpack, I can also have it in the augmented reality way. And we're actually just looking at a company this morning. They do a 3D rendering of your physical product. So for example, the couch behind me, I can just scan it with my phone, scan from the different angles, and I can turn it into a digital and augmented reality piece. And I can now sell it on the marketplace. and people might want to buy it and just kind of like put it in their metaverse or in your home. There's a big gaming metaverse community right now that just loves to buy these digital copies of the physical items. So yeah, that's just some of the examples of the features.
Well, you know what, thank you so much for that, Maggie. Anyone who has any questions, please reach out to us. I do highly recommend it. Everyone who's thinking about developing an NFT or even buying an NFT, and if it's a big ticket item, please get legal advice. There are a lot of issues, like Barry and Denise and Maggie, we've all spoken about complex intellectual property issues. There's definitely securities law issues with some of these tokens, and so as a developer, you want to be careful. I would always get advice before you start, but that's just my my own philosophy. It's better to be prepared than get into something and spend a lot of money to only have you having to redeem and give people back their money. So anyway, thank you, Clea. I don't know if we have...
Matt, just before you break, Monique had a question. I don't know if we want to address it. I think I can address it in 20 seconds. Do you want me to do that? Or are we
the old growth tree, the tree question? Yeah.
So the question is, would it be possible to have an NFT for a specific old growth tree? You wouldn't own the tree, but it would evolve over time as it is live. So what I interpret that question to be, and again, it could have multiple interpretations, is could you have the content in an NFT evolve over time where others can participate and help it grow? And there's actually two models that you see out there in IP where this can happen. One is the derivative works model, where the original owner can license others to have their product evolve, and they can do it on terms, including royalty terms. But another interesting one would be an open source model for NFTs, where when you create content that you're licensing others as long as they contributed back. And in that respect, then you get an NFT that has the input from many others, subject to kind of what would be the open source rules that might apply. For all we know, we'll have a new open source standard for an NFT. So the answer is yes, and there'd be different models to be able to think about it.
That is fascinating. Thanks for taking that, Barry, that question. That's great. That is fascinating. People could contribute to it over time and have an asset or grow. That's a fascinating thing. And boy, what an exciting area. And I'm glad everyone made time today. Everyone's time is valuable. Thank you so much, everyone. Clea, I'll turn it over to you maybe, but thanks for allowing me to moderate. I had a really good time.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I love getting to hear these discussions and learning from everyone's different perspectives. It definitely helps my knowledge base and learning in the space. So thank you everyone who joined in today. And next week, we do have an interesting panel coming up from our FinTech committee, specifically around custody. There's been some interesting discussions that have happened in the space, and I think that will be a very good one to join. So that will be on July the 1st. I know it's Canada Day, but if you have some time during your lunch and you want to hear it, fantastic. Please check us out again, canadablockchain.ca. We have monthly classes and weekly webinars coming up. So if you want to stay tuned to everything amazing happening in the space, we're a great place to be. And thank you so much again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.